Okay, so welcome everyone to our first ITSS Verona webinar of the year 2025. Tonight we actually still talk about 2024, which was a very important year, a year of widespread elections, and we try to focus on often forgotten but very important area, Eastern Europe and the Caucasus, where the elections were chaotic, to say the least. We talk about Romania, Georgia, and Moldova. And when I say chaotic, I mean Russian interference, which we saw throughout the elections. We saw widespread protests taking in the streets. And we also saw the very resilience of these democracies being tested. We saw social media being weaponized to control the public opinion, and this is something we will discuss in depth tonight. So basically what we want to do tonight, we want to try to make sense of these events. We want to try to understand what these events mean for these countries, for their future, but also for the European Union itself and for the future of democracy as well. So to discuss these very complex events, tonight we have a great team of experts, 5 people touching upon Russian interference in the past, and also each of the case studies, and again, the perspective of the European Union. So I would like to welcome you all. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This would not have been possible without your work. So I will briefly introduce each of you, starting from Nanuka Bregadze. Welcome, Nanuka. Thank you for joining us. She is a researcher and investigative journalist, and she works as an assistant trainer also for the joint project of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation and iFact, the School of In-Depth Study of Investigative Journalism. And tonight she will mostly discuss Georgia. She's currently based in Tbilisi. So thank you again. It's really a pleasure to have you with us. Sorry. Okay. Then moving on to Adrian Rose-Sassadeck. He studied international relations at King's College London and currently works as a director at IBM iX Germany in the field of intelligence and defense. Welcome, Adrian. Thank you for being with us.
Hi, everybody. Hi.
And then Will Kingston-Cox, a researcher at ITSS Verona on the Russia desk, focusing on Russia and Moldova. So, of course, he will help us navigate the Moldovan elections. And he's also currently a postgraduate in Russian and East European Studies at the University of Oxford. Welcome, Will.
Thank you for having me.
Moving on to Sarah Toubman, a graduate of the Master Program in War Studies at King's College London.
Я бы точно не капала на красные глаза, но твои глаза выглядят совершенно. Это вопрос личной прихоти.
There is some noise in the background. I will try to silence it. So I was saying, Sarah, a graduate for the Master Program in War Studies at King's College London, and today she is a researcher at ITSS Verona, where she also contributed on a very important research project we had on the rise of the far right in Europe, where she focused on Ukraine. And tonight she will help us navigate the Romanian elections with very interesting slides I'm really looking forward to seeing. So thank you, Sarah, and welcome.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Patrick René Haasler, a researcher at ITSS Verona on the post-Soviet space, and also currently working for a Berlin-based consulting firm and for the European Institute for Research. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you very much, and good evening to everyone.
So thank you again to each of you for your work. I'm really looking forward to hearing your presentations. And again, this is something I always want to remind before we start. We always discuss very sensitive topics, so let's just keep a very friendly and healthy debate throughout the webinar. We can agree to disagree at any point. That's totally normal, but let's just be respectful of each other's opinion, especially also later on in the Q&A session. So for those of you who just joined, we start with a few questions to each of our experts. And then in the end of the webinar, we open a Q&A session where you can actually engage with them. You can ask them questions directly. You can either jump in and talk, or you can just type them in the chat. I will see them. I will read them for you. So if you have any questions, we will make sure we answer those. So I would like to start with Patrick, actually. So basically, before we move to analyze each of the case studies, so Moldova, Romania, and Georgia, I would like to take a step back and look at the bigger picture, because one common denominator that we saw for each of these elections is the presence of Russian interference. So it is very important for us to understand how this sort of interference developed historically as well, how Russia has used this information in the past, and eventually, what does Russia want? What is Russia trying to achieve in the post-Soviet space and in Eastern Europe in general? So it's very important, again, to look at this, so that if we look at the past, we can actually understand the present and what is happening now. So Patrick, can you just briefly do an introduction on this so that we can better understand the background?
Yes, for sure. But before I start, I would like to thank everyone for joining us this evening. And I'd like to share my screen as well. So please let me know whether you can see my presentation.
Yes, we can, Patrick.
Yes?
You can go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Nice. Okay. So in order to understand what happened before the elections in 2024 and why it still matters until today, I would like to have a look at the following three topics. I'd like to start with a short historical breakup of the collapse of the Soviet Union and the following geopolitical reorganization, following up with a categorization of Russian interest and geostrategies, not a technical, but rather a geographical categorization. And I'll finish my my answer with a practical example of key disinformation tactics employed by the Russians. So, as you can see here on the left side, the Soviet Union was composed out of 16 member states, which after the fall of the Soviet Union declared independence. Lithuania made the start, followed by Georgia, Estonia, Latvia, Ukraine, Moldova, Azerbaijan, then followed by the Central Asian states, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Armenia, which is not in Central Asia, but followed, and then last but not least, Turkmenistan in Kazakhstan. That meant a loss of the superpower status for Russia, a loss of territory, and also population, as indicated here on the right side. It also led to an emergence of a power vacuum, and this resulted in a kind of NATO expansionism. And this, again, resulted in geopolitical tensions, foremost between Russia and the West. That means between Russia and NATO on a military level. So, in order to tackle these new challenges, Russia tried to engage diplomatically. It created regional organizations such as the Eurasian Economic Union, the Union State, for example, or also the Commonwealth of Independent States, just to name a few. But what also resulted after the breakup of the Soviet Union are the areas marked in blue, the so-called de facto states, post-Soviet de facto states, such as Transnistria in Moldova, Abkhazia and South Ossetia in Georgia, and up until October 2023, I think it was approximately, Nagorno-Karabakh, also known as the Republic of Artsakh. These de facto states are still relevant up until today because they serve as a strategic tool for the enforcement of Russian interests, geostrategies, and disinformation, first and foremost in Moldova and Georgia. Let us now have a short look on the possibility to categorize geographically, as I said, the different countries in which Russia up until today still tries to enforce its interest. So the first category is are countries where Russia is keen to preserve its interests. These are states which are seen by the Kremlin as being historical Russian territories. That means Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. So post-Soviet states. The second category is defined as attempt to either maintain or strengthen ties between Russia and European states, which are either seen as being presently aligned with or have the potential to be persuaded into aligning with Moscow in a geopolitical sense. These, for example, are countries such as Slovakia, Hungary, Serbia, or Bulgaria. Last but not least, the third category, the westernized category. This means, first and foremost, the European Union, but in a broader context, the collective West. What does it mean? It means that the Russians have to deal or tackle different conditions in order to enforce their interests. Some conditions can be more favorable, some are less favorable. That means that their strategies have to be flexible and adaptable. It means that they use a variety of tools and strategies depending on the regional or national context. And it means for us that we have to get an understanding of Russian interests and tactics that can differ from region to region, from country to country. Last but not least, I would like to finish with a short practical example of how Russia used disinformation tactics without going too much into detail. And the practical example I choose was the Russian annexation and invasion of Crimea in 2014. They have been successful in the creation of certain narratives, in the censorship and control of information, the use of social media to disseminate disinformation, and, for example, also in the denial of military involvement. And they have been able to do so because the conditions were favorable. And with that, I mean the Russian diaspora, and also, just to name another one, big media coverage, not just in Russia, but also in Ukraine. They have been unsuccessful in doing so, for example, in European countries. So their strategic deception attempts have been unsuccessful because of a lack of media coverage of Russian narratives, and therefore conditions have been unfavorable. Yes, that has been my contribution so far. Thank you very much again for your attention. And if you have any questions, don't feel free to ask them. I'll be happy to give you an answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for this introduction. So now let's start to delve a bit deeper into each of the case studies. So I would like to start with Will, and I would like to look at Moldova. This was a very interesting election indeed, and many actually said that this election was essentially, for many, a choice between Russia and the West. And we saw the supporter of the European integration winning, but we also saw an anti-Western narrative propagating throughout the country. So, Will, I know that you've been researching extensively how Russia has influenced these elections. So can we get more specific? Can we understand what are the specific tactics used by Russia, and how do these tactics sort of adapt to the local context? Because obviously each country is different.
Absolutely. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining this evening, and Patrick for that very insightful introduction. Yeah, so Russia's disinformation campaign in Moldova during the 2024 elections followed a strategic blueprint designed to polarize the Moldovan electorate and undermine trust in the pro-European government. Leveraging the 4Ds of disinformation, so dismiss, distract, distort, and dismay, the pro-Russian Shore Party, the Party of Socialists, and the Party of Communists deployed narratives aimed at fostering anti-European sentiments, economic fear, and nostalgia for the Soviet era. Pro-Russian oligarch Ilan Shor played a central role in spreading these narratives. Accused of embezzling $1 billion from Moldovan banks, Shor has been currently living in Moscow to avoid prosecution. But from there, he supported Alexander Stoyangalo, who, despite being formally independent, was backed by the pro-Russian Party of Socialists. Now, the results of both votes were decisive. So we had the presidential election and also the constitutional referendum. Incumbent President Maia Sandu, who was leader of the pro-European Party of Action and Solidarity, secured re-election with approximately 55% of the vote, defeating Stoangelo. The constitutional referendum, however, passed with a much thinner margin, a razor-thin margin of 50.39%. So this outcome, whilst a victory for the pro-EU camp, revealed stark divisions within Moldovan society and the effectiveness of the disinformation campaigns that had targeted the electorate in the weeks and months up into the election. So even after the EU and the US had imposed sanctions on Shaw, his network employed disinformation tactics to sway voters in Moldova. False communications, purportedly from EU institutions or Moldovan ministries, spread misleading information about EU plans to, for example, bring migrants into Moldova, to enforce LGBTQ+ rights, to deny agricultural support, and mobilize Moldovans to fight in the war in Ukraine. Now, these false narratives were designed to discredit EU integration, sow confusion, and erode trust in state institutions. Shaw's network used over 40 different websites and social media platforms to disseminate disinformation. So although many of these websites were flagged and eventually blocked by the authorities, new ones continued to surface. Telegram remained a key platform for spreading disinformation, where a special chatbot was created called Stop EU, which recruited 20,000 quote-unquote ambassadors to oppose EU integration. Participants were paid in the region of $50 to $2,500 per month, with funds transferred through Russia's Prombayaz Bank. Moldovan authorities accused Ilan Shaw of transferring over $39 million into the bank accounts of thousands of Moldovans in the 2 months leading up to both the election and the referendum, allegedly to buy votes for the pro-Russian camp in the referendum and the presidential election. Investigators in Moldova say that they uncovered about 1 million bank transfers in total, which reached the personal accounts of Moldovan citizens. Which leads me nicely to talk briefly on the threat of continued disinformation. So disinformation activities are almost certain to continue, with the aim of delegitimizing both the electoral process, which pro-Russian opposition groups claim is controlled by the European Union or its bureaucrats, and Sandu herself, who they call an illegitimate president. While Sandu's victory and Moldova's continued European orientation represents a setback for Russia, Moscow is unlikely to cease its interference. So during the upcoming Moldovan 2025 parliamentary elections, Russia is expected to attempt to install pro-Russian political parties that support institutional integration within Russia's sphere of influence, using the very same disinformation tactics and voter mobilization methods that were employed in 2024. And Russia may also seek to provoke violent protests by training activists in Russia using subversive tactics such as how to elicit agitation, mass demonstration, and the use of weapons and explosives, which has been alleged to be part of the tactics of Shaw's network. And I also wanted to very quickly just touch on the situation on the ground in Moldova and how it's complicated by the ongoing energy crisis in Transnistria, the pro-Russian separatist region situated on Moldova's eastern border with Ukraine, home to around 1,500 quote-unquote Russian peacekeepers. On the 1st of January this year, Ukraine terminated the transit of Russian natural gas through its territory following the expiration of a 5-year agreement and in the context of the ongoing war with Russia. This decision has effectively halted Russian gas deliveries to Transnistria, and the situation remains unresolved and therefore volatile. Russia has also said in December of last year that any actions threatening Russian citizens, peacekeepers, or its military assets in Transnistria would be viewed and responded to as an attack on Moscow itself. So these latest allegations from the Kremlin have been argued to be a part of this wider strategy to disrupt Moldova's accession into the European Union by destabilizing it and undermining trust in its democratic institutions, therefore leaving it vulnerable to Russia's coercive influence. The Kremlin, as was suggested by the Institute for the Study of War, I believe in December last year, could even be setting the conditions for a false flag operation in Transnistria. So in this view, it is important to remember the wider scope of Russia's hybrid war against Moldova that not only relies upon disinformation and interference within its democratic processes and institutions, but is also willing to exploit its separatist proxy to sow further discord and uncertainty in Moldova. And to kind of just conclude, I want to just give some recommendations. So, given Moldova's parliamentary cabinet political system, the upcoming 2025 elections will be pivotal for its future trajectory. Russia's strategic goal remains to block Moldova's EU integration and incorporate Moldova into its coercive sphere of influence. And so, to mitigate the effectiveness of Russia's disinformation operations, the EU should strengthen its strategic communication efforts and extend the mandate of the European Union Partnership Mission in Moldova beyond May 2025, its current expiry date. And the mission should also be equipped with the necessary tools to respond quickly to disinformation and cyber attacks while further enhancing Moldova's national capabilities in this area. And so, additionally, Moldova itself should continue to improve its own capacity to counter disinformation with a focus on, for instance, media literacy, fact-checking, and the strengthening of public trust in state institutions. So therefore, a coordinated effort to combat disinformation through cross-sectoral collaboration, local, regional, and international partnerships, and the enhancement of its digital infrastructure will be critical for protecting Moldova's democratic processes and ensuring its EU integration is achieved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Will, for your contribution. I just have a question. I know it's not easy to counter disinformation, of course, but is there anything that is currently being done to counter these efforts on the Moldovan side? Is there anything we are seeing at the moment? And if so, is it effective?
Yeah, well, the first step of any response to these kind of things is acknowledgement, and President Maya Sandu was very quick to do that. She publicly condemned the interference, describing it, and I quote, an unprecedented assault on democracy. She asserted that her government had evidence of significant vote buying operations with funds allegedly sourced from Russia. The second step, Moldovan authorities initiated investigations into the alleged vote buying schemes. Raids were conducted across multiple locations in Moldova, leading to the exposure of a plot involving $15 million from Russia intended to influence voters and disseminate anti-EU disinformation. Approximately 400 citizens were investigated for accepting bribes to vote against EU integration, and the head of the Moldovan police reported that over 138,000 individuals had received funds through illicit channels. Now, to bolster cybersecurity and safeguard Moldova's electoral processes, Moldova has collaborated with its international partners. The European Union deployed its cyber rapid response team to assist in monitoring and countering cyber threats during the election and referendum periods. And so my answer to your question, Klasa, would be that continuous efforts and possibly more robust strategies are necessary to strengthen Moldova's electoral integrity against future interference attempts. And for this, Moldovan leaders will need to work on their own capacity to resist and combat Russian disinformation and interference, as well as working more closely with the European Union and its relevant institutions to help bolster its resilience.
Thank you very much, Will. I'm sure we are going back to this later, but thank you for this introduction. It was very interesting. Sarah, I would like to ask you a question regarding Romania. Would you like to share your screen before we start?
Yes, let me find the
Sure. So going from Moldova to Romania, because we also saw Russian interference moving into EU countries. Romania had this election in November 2024, and we saw the rise of a far-right candidate, Calin Georgescu. But I'm quoting an article here because this is quite impressive. On December 4, Romanian President Klaus Iohannis declassified a series of intelligence reports revealing that on the day of the first round of the presidential elections, Romania had been the target of over 85,000 cyber attacks attributed to a state actor, reportedly Russia. Sarah, I'm sure this is just the tip of the iceberg. I know in your research you were focusing on the presence of bots and influencers having an influence on the public opinion. So my question is, can you describe these tactics in detail again, and can we try to compare them to the Moldovan case study, for example?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Carlota. So I've just pulled up some slides here to help illustrate some of the connections and the examples I'm going to be discussing. So here I'm going to trace some of the parties that were found to be behind this campaign of influencers and bots in Romania. The disinformation campaign carried out during the 2024 Romanian elections has been largely traced to TikTok, although other social media and social networking platforms were utilized, including Facebook, Instagram, and Telegram. An investigation by French newspaper Le Monde found that a network of 24 Facebook pages published pro-Georgescu advertisements. These were estimated to cost between 140,000 euros and 224,000 euros in the months leading up to the elections. Looking at TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, influencers were allegedly offered up to 1,000 euros to post content in support of Călin Georgescu. And the Le Monde investigation traced payments to the FA agency, a media agency that's purportedly based in South Africa. However, this agency was uncovered to be a shell company of Gambling Media Group, an organization linked to Zlode, a Ukrainian affiliate marketing firm. Zlode also reportedly had offices in Warsaw and ties to Poland. However, Polish investigative journalists found looking at the source code for the FA agency's website revealed comments in Russian. Le Monde notes that the company's advertising methods are only semi-legal as they involve mass information gathering, and it's partnered with a number of online casinos. In order to find influencers to promote Georgescu for pay, primarily on TikTok, GMG used FameUp, a Romanian platform designed to connect PR professionals and influencers. While many GMG employees regularly posted pro-Ukraine content, Le Monde points out that if the company did take money from the Russian state, this would probably be a byproduct of the semi-legal nature of the industry and not correlated to national alliances. I'll also share a link later for the full set of declassified documents from the Romanian intelligence services, which pinpointed Bogdan Peșir, a Romanian cryptocurrency scammer, as a potential source of capital behind the operation. He's also been linked to Russia, a claim he obviously denies. Peșir is shown to have donated 380,000 euros to TikTok accounts promoting Georgescu, and he also gained popularity on the app himself prior to the election. And Romanian intelligence services found he contributed 1 million euros total to Călin Georgescu's campaign. The investigation also found high volumes of comments appearing to be from bots on posts about the Romanian election on TikTok in recent months. To circumvent TikTok's behavioral monitoring systems, the bot accounts were reportedly each associated with unique IP addresses.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I have another question. There is always a lot of talking about the role of TikTok itself in these elections. It was a big player in the disinformation campaigns. But my question is, why is TikTok so unique in this respect compared to other social media, as in Facebook or Twitter? Why TikTok?
Great question, Carlota. This is sort of the question everyone wants to know. So even if no misinformation campaigns or foul play occurred in the lead up to the election in Romania, social media experts acknowledge widely that TikTok has a sort of best-in-class algorithm. So it's more addictive, more likely to feed viewers extreme viral or salacious content, and therefore earn more views. So as a result, we see outlandish takes promoted by Georgescu, such as the conspiracy theory that the 1969 moon landing was faked, would be more likely to be promoted and gain traction on TikTok versus other platforms. Furthermore, the Romanian government asserts that TikTok was not compliant with election regulations, as it requires social media platforms to clearly mark the accounts of all presidential candidates and disclose their financial sources. TikTok did not mark Georgescu as a candidate, according to the Romanian government. TikTok denies this claim and insists it rectified an issue with Georgescu's account being unmarked after 24 hours. You can see here the accounts of Georgescu and another candidate, Elena Lasconi. At the top, they both have the election marking. Paid political advertising is banned by TikTok, but so-called micro-influencers allegedly circumvented this by making content that did not directly name Georgescu, but it only alluded to him or his policies. Notably, these influencers' content was often very similar or identical, suggesting that they were reading off a copy and paste script. So here you can see there is some discrepancy. The account on the left featuring Lasconi, it does have a marking at the bottom that it has to do with elections, whereas this one of Georgescu on the right, it lacks that verification. In early December, TikTok announced that it had removed hundreds of thousands of fake accounts and millions of fake likes and followers based in or targeting Romania since September. It also claims to have removed hundreds of covert influence networks, including one being run by Russian state-owned news agency Sputnik Media. TikTok also estimates that it has removed hundreds of accounts impersonating Romanian government officials, politicians, or political candidates. TikTok claims it has robust round-the-clock pre- and post-publication processes in place, comprised of automated detection and human moderation in Romania. However, many questions remain about how exactly these processes work and how effective these are.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you for sharing the images as well. It always makes a difference to actually see what's happening, to see it in real life. Thank you. And I would like to move from this to Georgia, because here we discuss mostly social media and TikTok, but having today an investigative reporter with us, Nanuka, I'm just curious to know about the media landscape in Georgia. We saw, well, the elections were pretty turbulent there. We saw protesters, thousands of them, taking to the streets for 4 weeks. We saw claims of Russian interference in Georgia as well. So I just would like to know from a journalist perspective, how has this interference affected the media landscape in Georgia? And I would like to know this in details, meaning what is happening in practice? How is this unfolding?
Thanks again for having me here in this very interesting and timely discussion. And first of all, until I will answer your question, I want to tell you and express my support toward my colleague, Zia Amaglobeli, who is a woman, media manager and founder of two very important independent online media in Georgia, in Batumelebi and NetGazeti is the name of the media outlets. And today is the 18th day she's on hunger strike in the prison against, and like she's protesting what is happening around her, and she of course is not agree about what decision judge made against her, and she's in the prison now. And today it's like generally a 63rd day of ongoing protest in Georgia, and because this webinar planned like months ago, I'm here. Otherwise I had to be there in front of my colleagues, because today even now there is ongoing protest in front of the public broadcaster of Georgia that is funded by public budget, the money of Georgian people, and it's absolutely the machine of propaganda of Georgian Dream, the ruling party, and I would say the illegitimate government of Georgia for now. And the Georgian Office of Transparency International said that 2024 was extremely hard year for Georgia journalists because it was election period and the government wanted us to be calm and not to say any words against them. And both of pre and post-election period was very hard for us, especially after this already 2 months protest started. Transparency International documented more than 90 cases against that happened against journalists by special forces and mostly special forces, and some of my colleagues were physically attacked when they were on live broadcasting. And but those people very same next day they were out of the hospital, still standing in the street and covering the protests. Basically, this is not not the thing that is happens just now, and this is only these 2 months or something like this, or just this last year 2024. But Georgian Dream, during all the periods they are in the government trying to marginalize free critical media, and our journalists are never safe when they are covering even very calm stories there. And of course, us investigative journalists are more under danger than them, because we are trying to uncover the truth and their wrongdoings. For example, during pre-election period, my organization, both I work for, it's iFact and OCCRP, Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, we were covering how oligarch Ivanishvili, who is kind of shady ruler of the country, is still connected with Russia, with his wealth and money and stuff. And we were trying, of course, to cover how Georgia Dream was going to rig election. For example, how they were going to use the state money, for example, for their pre-election campaign, how they use the administrative resources, human administrative resources to their campaign their party, and how they used some state programs that were helping poor people for chantage. For example, if you want to vote for Georgian Dream, you're gonna lose this monthly help what you are getting from the state. Yeah, so to rig the government here in Georgia, it is not happening very same day when the election is. So it starts months before, and it's we need to discuss the whole process and not the election day only. Yeah, so. But we started investigate after election period too, how they tried on the election day to rig the election, because then it appeared that it was very Russian style. They had call center on each polling stations, and they were getting the votes online and telling it to the Central Election Commission. And when they realized that they were losing the election, they started to, for example, people were going there, of course, Georgian Dream party members with like several passports, and they were voting. Like one person was voting maybe 20 times or something like this. And in the end of the day, Georgian Dream said that they won the election. But yeah, there are a lot of, I mean, we investigative journalists and generally like free media and critical media, some NGO sectors are people who documented, gathered every like proofs and facts that the election was rigged and stolen. And this is why Georgian Dream don't want us to exit at all. And a very, I mean, what they did like before election, and the biggest thing that's created very, very serious problems for us. This is to implementing this so-called foreign agent law. They tried to get it 2 times, but first time in 2022 when they introduced the law, there was huge demonstrations, and they said that okay, we are taking it back. But like, yeah, it was kind of trick made by them, and yeah, like in 1 year period they reintroduced it, and after they adopted the law. So like it means that they created financial problems to us. I mean, yeah, they don't want us to exit at all, but still we are trying.
Thank you very much, Nanuka. I think it's pretty unique to get your perspective and the perspective of somebody that is there in Tbilisi seeing all of this. So thank you so much for sharing this. And because of this, sorry, go ahead.
So one very interesting point and very like crucial what I want to end is that they have stolen the court in this country, and court does not serve the people here. It's like totally serves to the government, Georgian Dream, like this political party, and the police. This is absolutely, I mean, here living in Georgia now feels like that you cannot feel that you will find your truth somewhere, or there is someone from the state, of course, who will protect you or stuff. And that's why we now have like 53 political prisoners in the country. And of course, one of them is my colleague, Mzia Maglobel.
Thank you very much, Nanuka. And just one more question, because you mentioned the protests are actually still ongoing. I know there was one in Batumi, if I'm not mistaken, recently as well. So I just wanted to ask you what is happening right now, and what do you think we are missing from the outside? Because obviously it's different what we get from our media and from our sources of information, and what is actually happening there. We might miss some parts of it.
So yeah, it's good that you mentioned Batumi, and there is another big city in Western Georgia, Kutaisi, by the way, my hometown, and another Western Georgian city, it's Alenji Khazukdikdi. So point is that there is ongoing protests. They are sometimes like little amount of people, but still they are there. They are protesting every day in the regions, and yeah, this is what is missing for like wider audience, like the regional activists who are fighting every day, and it's kind of sometimes their individual fights, because here we are in the street of Tbilisi, main street of Tbilisi, we are a lot, but in the regions they are like a little bit few people, and it's like very hard for them, but still they are trying all their best. What there is missing is the stories of families of those political prisoners, the children of those political prisoners who are missing their fathers, and they know that they are like little ones. Of course, they are abroad for work, but basically they are in the prison. Like, and of course, again, like everyday fights for covering and to do their job of my colleagues, because again, they marginalize generally the profession of journalists, and like you don't know from where threats is coming, because here this is very Russian style, right? To jail the journalists, to make them like silence, and I think that there are some level, unfortunately we don't have like measured, but some self-censorship of course, and this is very big tragedy for me. But there are still brave people, brave journalists who are working every day in the streets and different places where they see the corruption, that is the level of corruption is very high, level of crime is very high, and everything is kind of encouraged by the Georgian dream. But yeah, this is like everyday fight of the people who want the democratic future for this country, and like Western future of Georgia. Maybe it sounds like a little bit pathetic, but this is like this. And when I'm talking about these things, I'm quite emotional as well, because I'm in the streets mostly every evening, and even now I should be there.
Thank you, Nanuka. No, it's not pathetic at all. I think the work of people like you has never been so important for the outside world also to understand what's happening. So thank you so much for sharing this. And I'll definitely come back to you later on with more questions. But thank you so much. It's unique to have somebody like you with us tonight. So thanks a lot. Adrian, I would like to ask you some questions related to this. Sorry, and I have a quote for you, because obviously this is concerning for the European Union as well. And here it's an article from Politico that was recently published under the title, "Moldova and Georgia are ringing alarm bells for the European Union." And the article says, "For years, the European Union has been confident that its liberal democratic agenda would ultimately steer Georgia and Moldova away from the Kremlin's orbit and toward the West. This week's election now suggests that this optimistic EU vision is increasingly uncertain," and Nanuka was covering this extensively. So my question for you is, what are the tangible risks for the European Union? And in other words, to put it very simply, what does it mean for us? What does it mean for European Union institutions? And why is it so important what is happening to Moldova and Georgia for the European Union as well?
Thank you, Carlotta, also for the kind introduction. Very good questions indeed. As a retired staff officer, I will try to contribute as sharp, short, and crisp as possible, like always. But additionally, currently I'm a bit sick, so suffering from a cold, so that matches with getting hopefully to the point. But back to your question, let's face it, the increasing influence of Russia in Moldova and Georgia poses several tangible risks, I would say, for the European Union. So from a high perspective, in a nutshell, for instance, there's a weakening of the EU's influence. The EU's ability to promote its values and interests in the region is threatened by Russia's growing presence in Moldova and Georgia. And this can undermine EU's Eastern Partnership initiatives, which aims to build a common area of shared values, democracy, prosperity, stability, and increased economic integration. Then we have the security risks. A strong Russian presence in these countries may lead to security risks for the EU. Russia could use Moldova and Georgia as official, unofficial bases for military operation, or to destabilize neighboring countries such as Ukraine. And this can pose threats to the security and stability of the entire region. And then let's think about energy security. The EU relies on energy supplies from the region, particularly natural gas from the Caspian Sea basin, and Russian influence in Moldova and Georgia could disrupt energy transit routes, such as the Southern Gas Corridor, which aims to reduce Europe's dependence on Russian gas. Then, of course, migration and border control. If Moldova and Georgia become destabilized due to Russian influence, this could lead to increased migration flows towards the EU. And this could put additional pressure on EU member states to manage border control and asylum systems, possibly leading to social and political tensions within the EU. And furthermore, increased migration can be exploited by far-right political groups, as currently seen also in Germany, to promote anti-immigrant sentiments, which can undermine the EU's core values. And of course, as already mentioned a couple of times, spread of disinformation and propaganda. Russian influence grows, so does the potential for the spread of disinformation and propaganda. And this can undermine public trust in the EU institutions and have a negative impact on public discourse and potentially affecting EU's policy-making process. So Russian disinformation campaigns can also exacerbate existing divisions within the EU and create tensions among member states. So that's basically it for now. Back to you, Carlotta.
Thank you, Adrian. We were talking about some counter strategies earlier on with Will. So my questions for you is, what are the measures that the European Union is trying to take to counter these? Do we see any of them unfolding now? And again, the same question I asked Will before, are these being effective? Can we hope that these will be effective in the future as well?
Yeah, well, that's a tough one, because how you want to manage or measure that. And well, there are a couple of aspects to consider. I would say the EU's comprehensive approach is a strong one. First, to encounter Russian influence in Georgia and Moldova, the EU and its institutions have taken several steps. For instance, the Eastern Partnership Initiative. Both Georgia and Moldova are part of the EU Eastern Partnership Initiative, which aims to strengthen the relationships between the EU and the 6 Eastern European countries to promote democratic values and, of course, support economic integration. Then we have association agreements. The EU has signed association agreements with both Georgia and Moldova, which include deep and comprehensive free trade areas. And these agreements promote closer economic ties, political cooperation, and support reforms in various sectors. And of course, the EU is very powerful in the financial assistance and provides assistance to Georgia and Moldova through various programs and instruments. For instance, the European Neighborhood Instrument and macro financial instance. And I think Will covered it already. We have capacity building and technical assistance. The EU offers capacity building programs and technical assistance to strengthen democratic institutions, to promote the rule of law, and I think that's very important, and to support civil society organizations in both Georgia and Moldova. And of course, with that having said, the security cooperation, the EU engages in security cooperation with both countries, including border management assistance through the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, Frontex, and the EU monitoring mission in Georgia, which aims to prevent the escalation of tensions between Georgia and its breakaway regions. Then we have the visa liberalization, and the EU granted visa-free travel to Georgian and Moldovan citizens holding a biometric passport, making it easier for people from these countries to travel to Schengen area for at least short stays. And then we have the education and youth programs, like Erasmus program, and providing opportunities for students and young people to participate in educational and cultural exchanges. And then let's face it, we have counter disinformation efforts. The EU has established the East Stratcom task force, which focuses on countering disinformation and identifying and debunking false narratives spread by external actors such as Russia. And the task force also supports independent media and promotes media literacy in the Eastern Partnership countries. Yeah, and then dialogue with Russia. The EU shall, and I say shall, engage in dialogue with Russia on various levels to address concerns related to both countries, as well as broader regional issues. And I think it's very important to maintain open channels of communication. But if Russia were to escalate its actions in Georgia and Moldova, of course, or engage in further aggressive behavior, the EU could consider imposing additional sanctions targeting specific individuals, entities, or even sectors. So I think by adopting this, in a nutshell, comprehensive approach that combines political, economic and social and security measures, the EU might effectively support democratic processes and stability in Georgia and Moldova. But the question remains, how are you going to measure that? Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Yeah, of course, it's quite a hard question, but thank you for covering the strategy on the European Union side, and thank you for answering these despite being sick today. Thank you. Before I open the Q&A session, I have two questions, one for all of you. If you would like to add something to what everybody said, if you have any comments before we open it to the audience. Will, I see you're nodding. Do you want to jump in? Oh, okay. So
No, I was just...
Okay, sure. So no comments. No questions.
Comment on what Adrian has said.
Please.
Obviously, part of the EU, Romania, Russian interference in the Romania's election, the EU is allowed to take more of a active stance against that. So the EU Commission is currently investigating the Russian interference in Romania's elections. And being that the Romanian-Moldovan relationship is so close, there's going to be an impact there on whatever the outcome is.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And before we open the Q&A session, I actually have a question, if I may, that I just it's just something I would like to ask from your contribution, Nanuka. It's just something I think we don't talk about enough is also the opposition in Georgia, because you gave us quite a dark picture, and of course, I mean, what I know about the opposition is that it's quite a fragmented force. So my question is, why is it struggling so much to unite against the Georgian party? And can we expect a change for the future in this sense?
Okay, so this is kind of painful topic. Like, my very personal opinion is that generally Georgian opposition is very big. But another point is that like Georgian dream, kind of Russian style propaganda worked very well to marginalize them as well. And they created such kind of term, global war party. And that means that global war party, someone from Western world, together with Georgian opposition political parties and together with Georgian civil society organizations trying to drag Georgia with war with Russia. They created propaganda that's is like fundament of this propaganda is war. You know that we had the war in 2008 with Russia, and like the whole society, the nation have kind of trauma because of it. So it's very easy to manipulate with this. And of course, among these oppositional parties, there is national movement, the political parties that was in government before, and I would say that the second governmental time of the second turn of them when they were in government, it was quite tough for Georgian society, and they all the time, every opposition, no matter which oppositional party politician belongs, even the civil society belongs, they are calling us, you are as Nazis. So it means that you are a member of national movement. And that's why it becomes very hard because this propaganda works perfectly. It became very hard for opposition to gain the trust of the people who are kind of some Georgian dream electorate, but there are some people also who don't want them, but they thought that there are no one better because there are another part of propaganda that means that this global party together with opposition and civil society are threatening the sovereignty of the country and identity of the country and traditions of the country and religion of the country. And I mean, they are forcing people to become LGBTQ members, like some crazy stuff, really. So these people who does not like Georgian dream, but still they are kind of religious people and stuff, they cannot see other option because like they think that Europe will take our identity and our beliefs and everything what we have from us. Yeah. So I mean, we should admit that the Georgian dream with his Russian background and everything what they have taken from them, even some financial resources, they are stronger and organized than other side. I mean, the opposition.
Thank you very much, Nanuka, for answering this. And I think Patrick wants to add something. I see your hand is raised.
Yes, exactly. Just a short addition to what has previously said. I've been in Tbilisi during the elections in October, and I've had the opportunity to speak to some people, and I think the main problem, or another problem, is that the opposition cannot compromise because people, for example, voting for, I don't know, the United National Movement, they strongly reunite behind their party. So do, for example, so does the electorate of For Georgia as well. Means that they are strongly united behind their parties, and there is no will, there is no flexibility in order to maybe vote another parliament. That has several reasons. Maybe because it's a thing that their fathers or their mothers already voted for that party, that they only can identify with this party, not another one. So the people, the electorate of the small opposition parties tend not to switch to other parties, and that somehow counteracts potential compromises that could help the opposition to unify. That at least has been said to me when I was engaging with people in Tbilisi on the ground, and this is just in addition to what had been previously said. And please, Nanuka, feel free to correct me if I'm saying something stupid. Thanks.
I don't know who you talked about, but still, I mean, this is very acceptable for me. There are different opinions. I mean, my point is to show you the general picture. General picture is, and opposition is weak here, and they don't have the trust of the people, and they have inner conflicts between each other and stuff. And for example, even like when there is something that they want to union around the like specific topic, for example, the political party named for Georgia, they are all the time kind of going against and stuff. So they have their inner fights. And I mean, this is very sad, but yeah. It helps basically the Georgian dream.
Thank you very much to both of you. We are running short of time, so unfortunately I will need to start moving on to the Q&A session. Does anybody want to ask questions from the audience? Again, you can just jump in and talk, or you can type it in the chat. Anyone? Yes, sorry, I will just read it. Mayton Hu, welcome. As artificial intelligence grows more powerful and distinguishing facts from misinformation becomes increasingly challenging, how can these governments proactively combat future foreign interference? That's quite relevant and on point right now. Anybody want to take this?
I'll just jump in very, very quickly. I was speaking in December. I was speaking with some members of the European Parliament and how they can help states to have the capacity to identify, combat, and resist disinformation. And one of the big things is working from the bottom up. working on the population themselves, helping particularly young people, but also adults as well. If your population has the skill set to identify and resist these forms of disinformation, i.e., moving away from these algorithmic platforms like TikTok, which are known to show you sensationalized kind of echo chamber sources of information. If you educate your populations on this, they are better able themselves to resist it. I think it's a bit of a problem when we believe that this is an issue that the state can solve themselves. There is no one cat fits all solution that states can implement to resist this kind of thing. I think it needs to be a bottom up approach. So states should really be working on educating their population on what is disinformation, what are the kind of the main methods or platforms that they're disseminated on, what are the telltale signs, what are trusted, reliable information sources, and that way states have a better chance of protecting their electorates from disinformation. But there is no one size fits all kind of blanket rule that you can put in place. Otherwise, you kind of end up going down the very dangerous path of censorship, and this kind of then goes against kind of pluralistic democratic ideals.
Thank you, Will. Patrick, do you want to add something to this?
Yes, please. Thank you, Will. That was also part of my response I wanted to give. Another, let's say, possible vector tackling this problem is a cross-sectorial approach. That means what we currently do in counterintelligence is we monitor, we analyze, we assess, and we discuss these problems. Not only in the private sector, we do it in collaboration with EU institutions, in collaboration with the society, means that we monitor it, and for example, then we communicate these things, these tendencies, not only to the chief security officers of companies, but also to for example, people that tend to write cybersecurity newsletters, etc., and so on. So information, the distribution of information is very, very important in that regard, and that is something that Will already stated. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Does anybody want to ask something else?
Yeah, I actually have a question for all of them. And I know it's going to be bad, but allow me. Now, a question for Will, a question for Patrick, a question for Nanuka, a question for Sarah, a question for Adrian. Now, let's pretend, right, so as a concluding bit, that you are advisors to anything, right, so your country, right, so it could be the prime minister, it could be the president, it could be anything. Okay, so also Julia wants to ask, so there will not be like the last question. So please, obviously, like keep your thing short as much as possible. And I think that Sonia also wants to jump in. But what would you advise, given everything that we said? So let's start from Will, right? So I mean, so just we get a sense, right? So wait, did I miss Patrick? Right? I think that Patrick. Oh no. I mean, Patrick is there. So, Will, what would you advise Prime Minister Toubman? And so, if you were to say, all right, given everything that we said, this situation evolving, just a blurb. I know it's very difficult. Then we'll just go around. Patrick, same thing as for Austria. Adrian, same thing as for Germany. Sarah, same thing as the US. You can go with the US Department of State. Nanuka, instead, I'll ask you the same thing, but as you addressing the European Union. Thank you.
I would keep it very, very short and sweet. Education. I think whilst it is very important that governments work on their state capabilities of detecting disinformation and identifying it, you must start from your population. You must start from the bottom up. This is the most important. If you rely on the state to make these decisions for you and determine what is real and what is fake, essentially you've outsourced your critical thinking and agency to the state, which is not a good position to be in. So I would advise my own government to work on education, such as media literacy campaigns, to help their population be able to identify, resist, and therefore combat disinformation where it arises.
Thank you very much, Will. Patrick.
I would advise the EU Commission to get a understanding of what Russia really wants, because we tend to apply concepts and frameworks when it comes to Russian interests, geostrategies, and foreign policies, which do not apply to their rationale and to the nature of their interests. And that leads to a misunderstanding of Russia really wants, how they work and how they will work in the future. So this is something this is very essential for me and should be very essential for the European Union as well. And you may know that I'm Austrian, so I'm kind of applying a rather neutral approach to that. That is, maybe due to my Austrian heritage. So this is something I think is very, very important in that case in order to prevent conflict and come back to diplomacy, because it's better to fight around the table than on a battlefield. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Well received. Adrian, you in Germany.
That's really a tough one. Well, actually, I concur with Will. Educate and acknowledge, but I think we all should change our mindset a bit. So there's serious stuff going on, as Nanuka was telling us today. But I would highlight two points actually, that would be my advice. So strengthen bilateral cooperation or increase cooperation with Georgia and Moldova. And Germany should enhance its bilateral relationship with both countries with high-level diplomatic visits, offering more technical assistance. And the second one would be advocate for a united EU response. And Germany, as a leading member of the EU, should advocate for a more coordinated and united EU response to Russian influence in Georgia and Moldova. That's basically it.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Sarah, and then we're going back to Nanuka.
Thanks, everyone. I would say forward thinking and planning are crucial. So looking backwards, having seen the Russian interference in elections in Georgia, of course, it makes sense that they would go on to interfere in the elections in Romania. But given that, we can, if we have a more forward-looking approach, we might highlight Bulgaria or Latvia as areas of concern, start dialogues with their governments, monitoring their elections, try to act preventatively rather than backwards.
Thank you, Sarah. And then finally, Nanuka, back to you before we go back to Carlotta. You're addressing the European Union. What would you say?
Addressing European Union or Prime Minister?
Given everything that you said, right? So it'd be very, very interesting to hear, like, if you could address the European Union.
Just don't help them to make themselves legitimate, and don't meet their ministers. So I mean, illegitimate ministers or officials or staff, and not only stop visa-free for diplomatic passports, but generally stops visa-free for individuals. Let's start from this. But as for my kind of the person who tells that he is the prime minister of the country, I would have very simply advise: take the example of Serbian prime minister and resign, or in the best case, just admit that they are illegitimate and live with his whole illegitimate government and president as well.
Thank you very much. Luca. Carlotta, thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Michele, and great question indeed. I just wanted to say something very briefly. Will, you were talking about education. I completely agree with you. And I think if I can add one thing, we should really, if we want to focus on education, I think a great model to follow would be Finland. It's a country, I studied this before, it's a country that won the European Union Media Literacy Award for like many years in a row. They were ranked first, meaning that they have an education system where students are taught from a very early age to recognize misinformation, to recognize fake news, so that they develop, since they're very young, the critical skills you need. So I think one thing we should do more is to actually look at Finland as a leading model in this sense when we talk about education. But I totally agree with you. Sorry for this. It just came to my mind. Julia, and then Sonia. Julia, would you like to jump in?
Oh, yes,
the microphone?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, now, yes.
I don't know why I cannot activate my camera. I am very sorry. Well, first of all, thank you for the splendid discussion of everybody. Wow, I am seriously impressed. And I have a concern more than a question, and I would like to share it with everybody here. The current state of the disinformation countering has severely changed with the recent developments in the United States. And I'm not just talking about the presidency, but particularly the fact that the companies, the non-state actors, which are the private sector, are bending easily the norm. So now we're going to enter a time that there is no, how can I say, threshold for disseminating or to discern. I mean, there was a little bit in Facebook. It was not exactly the most reliable, but I think more than losing in the threshold of what is or not fact-checking, the fact of the owner, Mark Zuckerberg, saying that we're going back to the control of the no controlling the freedom of expression, that is more damaging than putting down the safeguards in their own, and the countering measures for fact-checking. So I think we're entering, or I'm fearing, please enlighten me, a time of obscurantism within what is the cybersphere and the culture. So, and the measures or the way to sort of prevent, while many of them collapse and can join in education from the early ages, the concrete actions within every country start to be very isolative. They cannot be fully shared due to political and cultural matters intersecting. So what is the future of the disinformation countering and the prevention of sabotages and cyber warfare and even cognitive warfare in this new context as it is developing?
Does anybody want to answer this?
Well, I can speak a little bit.
Please.
I think it's definitely what Julia said. Like, we can see this approach becoming more fragmented to addressing misinformation on social media. So in the Romanian case, there are specific laws in place requiring social media to flag content around elections, political candidates. So we see in this case that because of a violation of that law, they are being held to account. But that's an isolated mechanism. Across every country, it's going to differ. In the US, you saw the threat to ban TikTok for a variety of reasons, but that ultimately didn't end up happening. So you could see threats along those lines if countries are unhappy with how they're handling certain situations.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and Julia, thank you for your contribution as well. Sonia, can I read your question from the chat?
I can also just say it myself if it's okay.
Go ahead.
I just thought maybe you could manage it yourself, but I can also talk.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you all of you for your analysis and your insights. Also, it's a pleasure to have Nanuka here. And regarding what she talked about, I also wanted to briefly ask if she can tell us a bit more on what she does for a living, if you can. And also because I know that previously there were some partnerships with the European Council, I think, in terms of like good governance and anti-corruption mechanisms. And I don't know if there are some new or current initiatives or specific projects between the EU and Georgia to counter misinformation, but also to avoid or to prevent corruption currently. And if I'm not wrong, I think you work in this, right?
Thank you for the question. Sorry for this answer, but so far nothing prevents here Georgia from corruption, while those people is in the government and has captured the government, because corruption level is increased dramatically during these years, and it's what we are doing is just looking for how they are spending public budget, and this is in public procurements, for example, we are investigating public procurement. Still, it's open database. And we are looking how all those monies goes to the companies that is connected with some government associated people. And no matter it's on the local level, like local governments or generally, I mean, it's just about money, how big it is, who they are associated with, and it's about how they, I mean, giving, for example, very, very everyday life, what can I say? For example, permissions for construction, and they are violating everything, and the city now, Tbilisi, it's became, I don't know, crazy, and we don't have normal transport politic, and there are a lot of traffic during the day, of whole day. Mostly there are traffic, and public transport cannot serve the people properly because of this, and but they are spending even the money that is coming from international institutions. Those can be the loans from I don't know, from World Bank or ADB or stuff, and they are putting some corrupt agreements with Chinese companies. There are that are in the blacklist of the World Bank, for example, and they have some corruption background in former other former post-Soviet countries, but still they are giving these contracts to them, and that's why driving or a main magistral road of Georgia, it's absolutely not safe, and we have I don't know, here they have very good reasons. Everything is happening because of some I don't know, heavy rain or snow or something like this, and people are dying here because of that. And today there was case, and we just understand that 5 days ago 16 years old guy that tragically died in the main park of Tbilisi, and this territory where this thing happened. I mean, he was jumped in the hole and just died there. And for half hour, no police came there, no emergency came there, and just he died there. And we just, because City Hall tried to hide everything, this territory was given to the businessman who is associated with Georgian Dream, and they gave it very cheap price. And there now this guy took some he said that he would make 20 million Georgian lari investment during 3 times period, and it means that there should be some museums for now, but it's still nothing there. And just previous week I was calling to the state agency of state when it's state land and some properties. Yeah, they are controlling state properties. This is the institution that sold this property to the businessman. And I was asking, I mean, there should be 3 museums at least, and why there is nothing, and why you are not controlling this, and why this territory looks like this. And they were, Nanuka, we won't answer anyway. Why you are calling to me? This was the answer from the guy who is kind of media speaker. of this state agency. So this is the reality here. And what will save us from corruption? Just tell me. Sorry for this.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. I'm sorry you cannot give me a more positive answer for now.
Yeah, sorry, but yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nanuka. Does anybody have any other questions before we wrap it up? We still have a couple of minutes. Okay. If not, we can, sorry, just checking the chat. We can start ending the event, but before we do that, I really want to thank each of you for the great work you put into this webinar. Again, this will not be possible without you. So thanks to each of you, Will, Patrick, Adrian, Sarah, and of course Nanuka. Nanuka, it means a lot to us, the fact that you are with us tonight, especially at this time. And I think everybody.
Sorry for such stories, but yeah.
No, it's very important to uncover this, and I think everybody who joined this webinar could feel your passion and your commitment to uncovering the truth, and this is really important. And we understand this is a difficult time, so we really appreciate even more that you could make it to the webinar. Thanks a lot, really.
And everyone, anytime, if you want someone, at least some contact person in Georgia, feel free to contact me, and I would be very happy to help as much as I can.
Thank you so much.
Nanuka, how can we contact you, by the way?
Maybe I will put my email in our group, what we have on WhatsApp, maybe.
Yes, I forgot. Okay, sounds good.
Or
Thank you.
I will write it here in the chat.